I wanted to thank you guys for coming. Paul, my mom asked Paul, you want to come up for a second? Paul and I have been friends since before I can remember, I think.
Your memory's not that great.
I
Pretty
know.
close.
So Mom asked Paul to start with a prayer.
Alrighty. I don't know how many protests start with a prayer, but we'll go ahead here. She needs to come up and hear this.
I think if the protest started with a prayer, there'd be a different type of protest.
Yeah, probably. So I don't know if you'll be able to hear me over the trains and cars and the airplanes, but
God will.
pray. Father, thank you for this day that you've given us, and we thank you for sharing Merlyn's life with each of us as well. And none of us is perfect, and Merlyn was no exception to that, but he brought us great joy with his creations and laughter and his sense of humor and imagination. We'll miss him here among us, but his memory will keep us close. Pray the Holy Spirit that you will bring peace and comfort to Merlyn's family through this time of mourning. Life here on earth isn't easy as we deal with sickness, pain, and death. We thank you, Jesus, for being that perfect sacrifice that paid the price for all of our sins, that we may stand in the presence of holy God, fully redeemed. We look forward to a new day, a new earth, where we can rejoice and dwell with you in eternity. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
So when all of this, well, when my dad passed and all this started, somebody said something about doing a service, and my dad was pretty adamant about not wanting a service. But my mom's pastor told her, you know, the service isn't for your dad, it's for you.
That's right.
So we decided to do something anyway. So legally we can't do a service, so we're doing a protest. Since my dad didn't like TriMet, this is a TriMet protest. So I thought, if while we're talking, when the Max goes by, you know, the old melodrama thing, I want everybody to boo. Then it could be an official protest. And since he was, if you don't boo, you want to hiss, that's okay.
You can't hiss too much unless you're covered your mouth.
I didn't see you come in.
So my dad talked about his next adventure, and that he's on right now. And you know, working with him, you know, people would ask him questions, or he'd be working away, and he'd say, you know, if I don't make it to heaven and I go to hell, I'm gonna be a plumber. And if by some chance I do make it to heaven, all my tools will be plugged in and sharp. So I'm assuming my dad is making sawdust even as we speak. I wasn't going to say too much, but my dad was born in a little town, well, he was born in Mount Vernon, but he was raised in a little town, Cedro Woolley up in Washington, which was a logging town.
Yep.
It was a pretty tough town. His best friend in high school owned a junkyard, so they would scrap cars. So during the war, there was an embargo on selling car parts to Canada, used car parts to Canada. So my dad and his friend used to throw parts in a ditch that was the border between Canada and America, and they make extra money that way. I went to a car show with my dad, and he didn't say a whole lot when we were together, and he walked up to this beautiful car. It was a 32 Lincoln. And if you've ever seen one, it's got the burl dash, and it wraps around into the door, and it goes back. It was a convertible coupe. And he got really serious, and he said, boy, this is just a beautiful car. And I said, yeah. And he said, you know, me and my friend, when we were younger, we took a car just like this, and we took it out, and we tied a chain to the back bumper, we wrapped it around a telephone pole, and then we tied the other end to the front bumper, and we started it, and it went like this really fast. Until the telephone pole broke, and the car went free, and it hit a barn and just totally smashed up. So I think he felt a little bit guilty about that, but I imagine it was fun to see.
No video from back then.
So my dad, he moved down to Portland. He worked with his dad at a place called Roy Burnett's, which is the Chrysler Plymouth dealer in Portland. And I could tell you a bunch of stories about that, but the auto parts, the service department was upstairs. So during the riots that were the Americana parade when I was a kid, we used to sit up there and watch the mayhem down below. But when my dad was working there, he said there was one project where he rebuilt this lady's car. He worked on it for 2 weeks. And he said he poured his heart and soul into this project. And he was so proud of his work. And he said that lady came into the shop, got her key, stuck the key in the ignition, started the car and drove it down that ramp and left. And he said, nobody is ever going to care that I put that much work into that car. And so he decided at that point he was going to do something that he wanted to do a job where people would appreciate his work. And so he did an apprenticeship as a cabinet maker. I mean, it's amazing. Some of the guys that he apprenticed under were the guys who came through the era where we went from hand tools to industrialized tools. And that, kind of stayed with him his whole life. You don't go out and buy $1,000 tool, you make it. So
Sounds like our grandpa, huh?
yeah. So the Model T, everybody knows my dad about the Model T. Where that came from was my Uncle Joe up in Cedar Woolley. Joe said, Dad asked him if he could buy the car. He said, you can't afford to restore it. And so Dad said, I can restore it for $100. And so Joe said, if you can restore it for $100, I'll sell it to you for 25. So he said he got it all restored and ready to go. And he went to buy the wheels and tires, and the wheels and tires he was at $100, and when he went to buy the wheels and tires, they were $100. So he didn't make that, but he got the car going. But the project stalled. I mean, I go to do museum stuff, and people say, well, your last name's Lewis, are you related to Meriwether? And I'd say, let's see. Manic depression, alcoholism, can never finish a project from Kentucky. Yeah, I'm probably related to that. So the project was stalled. My dad was looking for a part. He talked to he went to the Model T club in Portland. Okay, here's where everybody moves.
Go home!
Hey, TriMet!
Thank you.
Killed our dog!
I would hate him too then.
Yeah.
So this guy told my dad that he couldn't get his car going without joining the club. And that's not the kind of thing that my dad takes lightly. And so he went home and he not only finished the car, but he built this beautiful car, and his goal was to go to all the parades that these guys were at and take the trophies and the ribbons.
And we did.
And he did. I know most people here know that my dad worked on all the Farrells. And for those people that don't, I was talking to somebody the other day they knew about Farrells, but their kids didn't. And they said, how do you describe Farrells?
Oh, man.
You can't really describe it. It's like Disneyland for ice cream or something.
Yeah, there you go.
So my dad did all the fixtures and all the Farrells ever. So we kind of hung out with Bob Farrell, which was an incredible thing. Something that a lot of people don't know is my dad made friends with a guy from Oregon Historical Society. And I found out later that Harry couldn't drive, and so my dad was driving this guy around. But he was one of those guys who, when something was donated to the Historical Society that they didn't want, Harry was the guy that got rid of it. So my dad had some pretty cool stuff. But one of the coolest things out of that, there were several things. One is my dad got to work on the Pittock Mansion, and he worked. So when Mr. Pittock built that house, he used young artisans so they'd be around later if they had to do work on the house. So my dad got to work with some of the guys who did the original work in that building. And I got to be there and see some of that stuff. It was one of the best experiences of my life. I wasn't very old, but I got to see these guys who were 80 holding the trowels up to do the cornices with these trowels and just overhanding this mud. It was amazing. The other thing he got to do is during, I can't remember what year, it must have been '64, the Smithsonian sent a bunch of stuff out to Oregon Historical Society that was on the Lewis and Clark expedition. And so like there was a bunch of coins that they brought out to trade with the Indians that they didn't trade, so they went back and so they got put in the Smithsonian. So we got a bunch of those coins, and I'd take this stuff to school and my teachers didn't believe me that it was real stuff. But the coolest thing he got to do was Lewis and Clark brought a cannon out with them. And I think the only time they fired it was up at the Columbia. They set it up and they tried to shoot it over the Columbia and they didn't make it. So my dad and Harry Lichter got to go up and try to recreate that, which I think was pretty cool. And then the only other thing I was going to say is people want to know about the store and how all that came about. So we lived here for about 3 years when I was a kid. So we got to know some of the neighbors and we liked the area. When I got out of the Army, I was looking for a place to buy, to invest in property. And so I found this place was for sale. I thought, well, that sounds pretty cool. So I called my realtor friend and he brought us out. My dad said he wanted to come, and so we came out and looked at it. My dad, I remember standing out front of the store and he said, man, just don't buy it. That is too much. No, there's no way. You just don't buy it. It's too much work. So I thought, okay, and so I did a little research and found out there was some history kind of stuff you could do with it. And so I said, Dad, I'm going to go look at it again. And he said, okay, I'm going to go with you. So we went up to the top of the stairs and he took his 6-inch pocket knife and he pushed it into the windowsill and he said, you know, this whole building is rotten. It's going to fall over. You don't want to buy it. Well, so I just kind of gave up on the idea. And about, 2 weeks later? Yeah, he borrowed against the house and he bought it.
So he didn't know you
out of the way, huh?
Yeah, so that was in 85, 86, 83. So he's been wrestling this thing since then. I mean, there's a lot of stories, a lot of stuff. I mean, I lived out here for a while with Dad, and I mean, I've been out here a lot and gotten to know a lot of you guys, and
Like going up the staircase, the whole wall fell down. There was a honeybee's nest in the corner. He got stung 19 times. He didn't even get sick.
we put the honey in garbage bags. There was 60+ pounds of honey.
Wow.
And we found out something very important. If you put honey in the freezer, that when you take it out, the bees aren't dead. And they're really fairly angry.
Yeah,
So,
like tarantulas, they hibernate.
Oh, dear.
so that's really all I was going to say. You know, I can't really say much more because I haven't had a good cry yet, and I don't want to do it here. So I'm going to open it up. Maybe if anybody wants to know anything or anybody just wants to say anything.
You have to tell us.
Anyway,
You helped me. I've got a Chris Craft boat, and it's been in the family since new one. It got run into